Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. It's KLOS New and Approved. I'm very excited to have my guest, Krist Novoselic, who obviously I love and been a big fan of for such a long time. And we go back, there's quite a history. So it's great to have him on the show. And Krist, it's good to see you, man. It's so good to have you here. Thanks so much for agreeing to do the show. How you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. It's nice to see you and hear you, and it's great to be on KLOS.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. So, Krist, let's talk about the new record with Third Secret. It's really cool that you got together with, longtime friends, of course, with Matt Cameron and Kim Thayil, who you've known, forever from Soundgarden, and then, of course, with Jennifer and Jillian, who, you played with Giants in Trees. And I want to get more of the background on that, but talk to me about how Third Secret came about, because I know it was kind of a secret for a while, right? You weren't letting people know that you were going to be working on this project.
Well, we were, the world revolved around that lockdown in 2020, and I was getting caught up around the house and doing chores, and I just had stacks of old CDs, DVDs, VHS, right?
Yeah.
So I was going through these things and throwing things out. So I found this a CD, like a home burned CD, and there was this. It said September 1999. No, September 2001, and I was listening to it and I go, those are some crazy riffs. I remember that. I was jamming with Kim and Bubba and Alfredo Hernandez. And I'm like, wow, this is some cool music. So I digitized it and I sent it out, like, especially to Kim and Bubba. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember this stuff. And like, we should jam again. And I'm like, absolutely, let's jam. And it just so happened at that studio, Matt Cameron had some time off from Pearl Jam. And we just started playing, and we resurrected those old riffs. We came up with new riffs, and we had songs. And so, like, wow, this is great. So I had this demo. At the same time, I was doing Giants in the Trees demos with Jillian, just she and I. And we had some songs. And like, hey, Jillian, check out these riffs. Could you do some vocal phrasing and some lyrics and things? And she did. And the fellas up in Seattle liked it. And so then Jillian and I went to Seattle, and we started just playing, and all this music came out. And then there were all these ideas for, like, well, there's going to be this Giants and Cheese record, or there's going to be a Krist and Jillian record. There's going to be a Matt Cameron record. There's going to be a Kim, Krist, Jillian, Matt, and Bubba record. There were all these records we were going to do, like, well, this song's going to be a Matt, blah, blah, blah. And then just time kept going on. And it was like, late winter of 2022. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make this record. This is what I propose. And that's pretty much what you hear with the Third Secret record. Like, so there's a mishmash of like different performances, and that's how Third Secret came to be. So it was basically it was a lockdown record.
It's really cool. So explain to everybody who Bubba is, because Bubba's from Void, but some of them from our listeners might not be sure.
Bubba played in this seminal Washington, D.C. punk band called Void. And there's some YouTube videos from like 1983 and 1984. And you could tell they're playing like in the basement of a Legion Hall somewhere in like the Washington, D.C. Beltway. And it's pretty cool to see all the punk rockers out. And what a diverse scene Washington, D.C. was as far as punk rock goes. And it's some great music. And then you see Bubba's there, and he's just fabulous playing with Void. And, Kurt and I were always fans of Void. Dave was, we are, fans of Void. And then Bubba, I met him in Seattle in like 1999. And I know he did some sessions with Soundgarden. So he was like in that world. And, and we just love playing together. And then Bubba and Kim, just having two electric guitars, and they do that weaving thing, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's a really cool. I mean, these songs on here, like I Choose Me, Live Without You, there's some really great songs. It's 11 tracks, and I just love the feel of it, because I listen and I hear the things that make you and Kim and Matt Special and Bubba, and it's great to hear you with the ladies as well, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's a grunge record, but there's other influences too. There's like this real pop music sensibility. I mean, there's one song where I play accordion, so it kind of goes back to the Giants in the Trees kind of synthesis or transition or what have you. And yeah, it's just kind of like, what is the music we like? Is it a good melody? Does it have a hook? Do we think it has a hook? Those kind of things.
Yeah, well, it really works, no question about it. Since we're here on the air on KLOS, it's one of the things that I think a lot of people may not know is you were born actually in Compton. That's where you were born years ago, right?
I was born in Compton, California in 1965. My parents lived in Gardena, California. My dad worked for a sparklets water company, like he delivered 5-gallon bottles of water. And my mother was a hairdresser, and we lived in South Central Los Angeles. And then there were these riots in about the time I was born, and my parents were freaked out about that. And so they moved to San Pedro, where they wanted to be closer to their Croatian community. And so there's like tons of Yugoslavians and Croatians in San Pedro. And so that's where I started going to school, and I went to junior high school, and I went to, I moved to Washington State in 1979. But, I really came of age in Southern California in the late 70s, listening to KLOS.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love
so long.
I love knowing that, and it comes full circle here. It's great. What were some of those first records? Yeah. I know that you had influence. I think your dad was into cool music as well. But I mean, you were hearing. I mean, I know the punk thing. Eventually, you found that, like I did after classic rock, because you're looking for something new, and it all comes full circle because we still love a lot of things that we grew up on. But talk to me about what you were listening to in that period.
Well, when I came of age, I used to hang out with my dad, and we used to listen to like Chuck Berry and the Rolling Stones and AM radio in his like garage. And then so I really got into 93 KHJ and the real Don Steele.
The real Don Steele, that's right, the legend.
Yeah, and we would hear like Bowie's, like when Bowie's golden years and Fame were on the radio, right? And we'd like listen to AM radio and that outro to Fame with the voices descending.
Yeah.
Right? We're like, this is so cool. So like I was into like top 40 radio. Then I got into harder music because I gravitated to the FM dial, right? So I started listening to FM music, and I discovered bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. So I got into that. And then in 1979, my family moved to Aberdeen, Washington, where everybody was still listening to like AM top 40, but different from LA because they were listening to like Kenny Rogers, right?
Yeah.
It was a different vibe. And I was into Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith, and kids weren't really into that yet. Maybe in high school we were, but not in the 9th grade. And so I kind of felt like an outsider. And then I got really bored with rock music in the early 80s. And then I would go to there was this place called Dill Secondhand Store where they had thousands of albums and I would rummage through them, and like I found like Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsies with like the naked lady cover, right? Like I bought that for $2. I bought a Captain Beefheart Trout Mask replica, a radio promotion copy for $2 because a record was $1 or $2 if it was a double record, right?
Yeah.
And this place had a bear trap on the wall, which was like, I don't know if you can see my hands, but just poor bears, like these giant bear traps and these giant chainsaws. They had all kinds of stuff in there. And so I would buy like Yes records and weird, like kind of prog rock records. And I was kind of into it. And then like, yeah, this is different. It's more interesting than like the heavy metal or the kind of rock. There was interesting heavy metal in the early 80s, like Metallica, Kill 'Em All came out, so I got into that through Buzz Osborne and Matt Lukin from the Melvins, and they turned me on to the American hardcore scene, and that was like 1983. So that's when Void was like raging and doing things, and so there were these communities in like Olympia and Tacoma and Seattle, where there was just like young people with like shared needs and values who really weren't plugged into the mainstream media. It's like we found each other, and there was like the scene, there was the music scene, right? And so the national bands would come through, and we'd see like the Meat Puppets and the Butthole Surfers and Black Flag. Buzz and Matt and I went to go see Black Flag in Walla Walla, Washington, because we didn't want to go to Seattle. Kurt Cobain went to the Seattle show, but we wanted to go see them in the hinterlands because they took this tour to the people. They're on this mission Black Flag were on this mission to bring punk rock music to the hinterlands, right? That's a true believer. And they played in this community center in Walla Walla, and there was kind of some people there. Then there was a fight. It was intense. But Tom Tricoli's dog opened with SWA. So there's like SST Records, like showcase was going on. But it was just so exciting because you'd never read about that in any mainstream media. So it was something that like we felt like we were part of. And so we just kind of made our own way. One thing led to another, and Kurt and I started a band. And so we just started making music and got just serious about rehearsing.
What was the first records that you guys were talking about when you and Kurt first met? What kind of things did you bond over?
When punk rock was a way of life. It just wasn't just like punk rock day at the high school or doing your hair. To me, it wasn't. It was a state of mind.
No, I know, because I agree with you 100%, just because it wasn't like, like a thing for the mall. I mean, it was like you were either into it or you weren't. You know what I mean?
Either you weren't into it or you weren't. And there were some people who were into it, but they were like doctrinaire punks, right? And so they'd have like the GBH spiked hairdo and the spiked leather coat, right? Which is fabulous, and they were like all bought into punk rock. But we were just like, hey, these Black Sabbath records are really cool. Like, why would we want to? They would go, like the doctrinaire punks would throw their 70s heavy rock records away. Like, that is a false god, and all who espouse this are false prophets. The new god is punk rock, right? So there's that orthodoxy. And we were just like, well, do the Meat Puppets really sound punk rock? Butthole Surfers are just crazy psychedelia. And so we were of that school of just like, well, we'd like melody. We'd like just interesting music. And, at Dill's secondhand store, I bought plenty of like Johnny Cash records too. Yeah. And like, hey, this is really good music.
Yeah, so you were into everything. That's great.
I was into everything. Yeah,
I know that. I mean, it's so obvious because you guys did love melody, and that was the thing that was so important. Because melody is a great thing, and there's melody in all forms of music, punk rock too. So yeah, it's funny. I was the same way, that I didn't throw out all my great rock records that I grew up on. I kept all my Aerosmith, Zeppelin, Sabbath, because I knew that I still love those records. So, and I'm glad I held on to them, because it was.
Yeah.
I remembered. Yeah. Henry Rollins was doing a stand-up once, and somebody called me up and said, Henry said, I threw out a lot of my old records. He goes, I bet Pinfield held on to his. So, I mean, he was right, because it's the truth. You know what I always wanted to ask you, too? Krist, when you guys covered Love Buzz, whose idea was it to do the Shocking Blue song? Because a lot of people would only know Venus or Hot Sand from the single, but that was like a deeper track. I wanted to ask you.
That was my idea. And because I worshiped that, I had a crush on that record for like, how you, for like 3 weeks, how maybe a couple weeks, you're like really into a record. And that was just it is a really good record. And of course it has Venus, and that was their big top 40 hit. But it's just an interesting record. There's a lot of melody. There's like different approaches to songs. There's different sounds. And it's a satisfying listen from beginning to end. It's really interesting. So they had, there's Love Buzz, but before Love Buzz, there's this instrumental called, I think, Aka Ra. And and then it breaks into Love Buzz, which is just like, Eastern mysticism, right? But
Yeah.
hashish or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
North Africa, man, Well, they were Dutch, right? So it was that kind of thing. Kind of like Brian Jones would be into, okay? And it's just a fun record. And then when you have that punk rock state of mind, you're like, what really are the rules? I mean, there are rules, but what are the rules? It's just like, it's melody. It's something that you want to, if the music speaks to me, maybe it'll speak to other people. And so we just started jamming it at rehearsals, and then we started just for fun. And then we did that instrumental break, and we only do one verse of the song because Kurt never sang "I need you like a desert needs rain." That's in the
Yeah.
that's in the original version, but he never did that. But then we did that kind of jam, right? And we would play it at live shows, and people really liked it. So like, hey, let's record it. And we did that first single with Sub Pop, Love Buzz, with Big Cheese on the B-side.
Yeah, it's cool. That album, that Shocking Blue album, that song "Send Me a Postcard," there were some great tunes on that.
Oh my God! And the bass player, what is his name? Klaus. Oh, shame on me for not remembering. That bass player is so good. Oh yeah, Send Me a Postcard. If you listen to that bass line, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah,
like you can say somebody else has been listening to this bass line and who's in a big '90s band. Who was it?
Yeah. Because that's such a killer song. I love that song.
It's just a song. Yeah.
You watch the footage of the Shocking Blue from back then when they did like Venus? I mean, she was so cool. She was like,
Mariska Perez.
Yes.
She was a star.
She's really great. Was. There was something so cool about that band, and just, I'm glad you love that record too.
And they have a lot of singles. Like they have good songs. They're just a really, really good band, and they never really had more hits, but these days you can just find them on your music stream. I completely recommend Shocking Blue for satisfying listening.
Speaking of bands that you guys listened to back then, one of the things that meant a lot to me that I found out later was that you guys had listened to the Smithereens' first album a lot, especially for you, because they're from my hometown, and I love that. So I want you to tell me the story, because I know that
Smithereens. So we had this Dodge van that we would tour the United States in, and we just had like a few cassettes. And there's one cassette that had Smithereens on one side and Celtic Frost or Celtic Frost, whichever way you pronounce it, which is this like English sludge metal from the early 80s, which was really good. And on the B side, so one side was Smithereens, this kind of pop driven music, and the other side was this just like heavy sludge metal. And I think that somehow warped our brains on those just long drives and like on the Montana highway. Right?
Yeah.
Like putting it in and then listening to tape, and you have to flip the tape over and put it in. And all of a sudden it just kind of melded together somehow. That's my only way I can explain it.
That's cool that you guys like that, and I know that Kurt wrote about that in his diaries. But I actually love that album, and it meant a lot just because they're friends of mine from my hometown.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Pat D'Annunzio, he wrote great songs, and they were actually
God bless him. Yeah, God bless him.
Yeah, sorry that we lost him. When he was 50, but he was so great. It's amazing, looking back on that. And one of the other things too is, when you guys did Molly's Lips with Nirvana at the session over there in the UK and on the John Peel session, how you have like only a couple minutes to record stuff. Tell me, you guys picked that track. Was it one of those things where you loved it was last minute, or was it something that you were doing live for a while?
I think it was last minute. Like we'd show up at Maida Vale Studios there, this BBC Studios, and it's really like institutional. There's all these studios and hallways and professional people. And then you meet the engineers who are fabulous. And then they have to take a break, and you go to a pub across the street for an hour, because I think that was the rules. We'd have a beer, a Guinness or something like that, like an English beer, right? And then we'd go back and finish recording. Then we'd go in the commissary, and there was like really cheap food, which is great because everything's always expensive in the UK and in London. So at the time we were broke. And so that was, but we'd go in there and just like, well, what are we going to do? And so let's just do some covers, whatever we felt like doing. And we would try to make covers our own, you know, like our interpretation of what a cover was, because we liked a lot of music. We were big fans, still a big fan of the Vaselines. It's just again, it's that pop music with a lot of melody, that just kind of that sensibility.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when you think about those, and you know, when you, Chris, I mean, you guys did the real punk rock way of touring all those years. You know, when you were playing early on and before, of course, everything exploded with Nevermind. What was some of the, when you think back about that, what was like the longest you went without a meal? Or I know you guys would eat corn dogs or whatever and kind of pool your money, but what was it like? What were some of the craziest periods of that? Because when, you know, everybody has their story about when they're on the road in a van or a station wagon or something.
It was great. It was just like it was the open road, the romance of that, like America, the highway, rolling down the road, pulling into a new town every night, and there'd be like a group of people who knew us, and you'd make friends because that was their scene. Like they were into the punk rock music at the time, and yeah, you know, we try to eat good. That was one of our things. Like one time Kurt and I walked into like a 7-Eleven, and like we only had like maybe $4 between us, which was okay, like in 1988 or 87, right? And so I got this like crappy hot dog, and then he got one of those like drumstick ice cream things, right? And then so I just kind of like sneered at him, and I go, no wonder you get sick, no wonder your stomach hurts like that. And then he just got pissed off.
Yeah.
You know, the way he gets so intense, right? But you know, I still think I had a point with that stuff, but at least, you know, I don't know, but who can say what's really nourishing when you're eating this just kind of a 7-Eleven chili dog, right? It just kind of tears your guts.
Yeah, it's a processed food thing. You know, we've all, but everybody.
I skipped the nacho sauce, the nacho cheese on that. I skipped it. I knew not to do that. But we would try, you know, we'd pull over in restaurants and try to eat good, and so, you know, we had money. We'd make $300, $400, $500 a night. I mean, and we didn't really have any expenses except for gas and cheap hotels.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's incredible. And I always thought it was so cool too, Chris, how the UK kind of fell in love with the band, like even before a lot of people in the US knew about it. You know what I mean? When they discovered Bleach, all of a sudden there was just so many bands that I would meet from the UK, and I go, what's your favorite band? You know, when I was doing radio in Jersey, you know, obviously I was one of the first people to, you know, actually, you know, put Nirvana in regular rotation, you know, in the Sub Pop days. So, but I would ask bands what they liked, and bands would come over from the UK and go, oh, we love this American band, Nirvana, which was cool. I mean,
I was just in London a few months ago and just walking around central London, and I never saw any of those like news kiosks, and they'd be like on every corner, and there'd be like the Daily Mail, and there'd be the Telegraph, and there'd be all kinds of English magazines. And at the time there were 3 music magazines: Melody Maker, Sounds, and NME, New Music Express. And Melody Maker and NME have been around since the late 50s, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
These were these weekly tabloids. And so they had these writers that had a real flair for writing, you know, and they would write about bands, and they would just like, a lot of times you would read things in those magazines and it wasn't really about the band.
Yeah.
Like the impression of the writer, or just kind of what mood they're in. So it was pulp, right? And then they got into the Seattle scene, and so that gave us the exposure. It was Jerry.
Yeah. It's amazing when you look back on it too. And like, speaking of that, when you guys did Smells Like Teen Spirit on Top of the Pops, it's really remembered as one of the coolest things to do and wildest performances, because
that was a burned out band. That was a band that was just like tired. And then we show up backstage, and for some reason there is a mountain of these English beers, like these tall boy beers that are just like big cans of beer, right? And I was just exhausted, so I just started just hammering these beers. And Kurt didn't want to lip sync. You're supposed to lip sync. The singer could sing, and the rest of the band just mimes, right? And so then Kurt he didn't want to sing. He just wanted to mime, so he could ham it up. But that's why he sang like Morrissey. That was like, so he was all like being stubborn, like, I don't want to do a live mic. I don't want to do a live mic, you know? And so then we finally go up there and he does this Morrissey shtick. And then the kids jump on, they rush the stage. It got so crazy. And if you watch that video, you can hear a pop. And one of the kids like unplugs the microphone and like runs out of the studio, like Kurt's microphone, gone forever. And so the stage manager guys got their headphones on and just like, they're just that, you know, they were pissed off. I think we were banned from that BBC ever after that, seriously. Then we got in these cars, we got on these like rented chauffeur driven BMW sedans, these giant cars. And we got whisked to like Manchester or somewhere, and we played this show. And it was just like, that's how intense it was. And then you'd have to think about how intense Kurt was. So he's up there, he's singing, he's playing guitar, and we're like trying to be intense, right? But it takes its toll.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and especially with the grueling schedule you guys had when everything was happening, that seismic shift that we always called the bulldozer, because it was like, you know, it was just an incredible explosion. Yeah. Speaking of that, I got to ask you this, Chris. So when making the video for Smells Like Teen Spirit, you know, I've talked on the air about the original posters that were put around town, you know, looking for people that were like, you know, jocks and, you know, freaks and burnout partiers and everything. And talk to me about that day. What was that day like with Samuel Baer?
I don't remember a lot of that day. It was another just kind of thing we did. We mimed the song. We went through it. Hey, we're making a big league video. And I just kind of like, and I think we had something else going on that evening again. Like it wasn't the end all. There was something else going on. But I don't really do like mime videos anymore. I don't want to do them ever again. If you see the Third Secret videos, it's like we've got about 5 videos on YouTube, and they're all live performances, like live in the studio. And so we set up with all the microphones and we record to like a multi-track, because, you know, Nirvana loved to play. And there's like, we did that MTV, was it live? We did MTV in studio. Nirvana did in New York in like 92, was it? Remember?
You know, I was there. You know, it's crazy. I'm standing right over you guys. Like, it's really weird. There was like
on that balcony.
Yeah, that balcony. Like there was a 5. Remember, it was like this, and you did like 5 songs or 6 songs, and if you look and watch that video, you'll see me, and I still have a little bit of hair. It's really funny, but I'm actually there.
I know how that goes.
No, you know,
so Nirvana loved to play, and so with like Third Secret, we're all musicians and we don't play enough. But that's going to change soon. We're going to get together again. And we just like to play. And so it's just like, why would we want to like mime this video or have some kind of like conceptual kind of thing? It's kind of like, it's real music, and we're playing the songs and yeah.
Can you talk to me about the ladies in the band, Jennifer and Jillian, how you became friends with them and how Giants in the Trees started? Where did that relationship start?
There was this Grange Hall in Skamakaway, Washington that needed to be reorganized. And so I'm active in my local Grange. And so I got involved with trying to get that Grange reorganized. And so I started to go to their meetings and trying to get people to join. And now that Grange is back. It came back. But at the time I was like, I wanted to play music. I just finished online college. I got a degree in social sciences from the University of Washington.
Yeah.
And I did it all online. And so that was like 2016, I graduated. Like, what am I going to do? So what I did is almost immediately had 2 musical projects. I had Giants in the Trees and then Butterfly Launches from Sparpole.
Yeah, talk to me about, I want to hear about both of those because it's really interesting to me because of the study of moths and butterflies and all. And talk to me about the doctor you did that with and how, I want to hear about both those projects.
Okay, I'm going to go. So anyway, at the Grange Hall, let's have a jam session on the Saturday in the Grange Hall, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a great place to play. And so we brought our gear, and then it was Julian, Ray, Eric, and myself were the only people that showed up. Right.
Yeah.
And immediately, like, we weren't playing like cover songs or just like these blues jams or anything. We started writing music right off the bat. And the first song we wrote was Sasquatch, and we got a song together and we just started writing songs, and it was compelling for me. It's just like, well, this is what I want to do. I want to just make music, and it was fun, and everybody had something they contributed, and we just started making music, and we did that. We did 2 records with Giants in the Trees. Robert Michael Pyle, Dr. Robert Michael Pyle, there's a biopic of him starring David Cross and Deborah Messing, and it's called The Dark Divide.
Yeah.
And that film came out like last year, something like that, and it's based on his book. He's an author, he's a lepidopterist, so he's a scientist, and he and I met in like 2010 at a Leo Kottke show.
Wow, Leo Kottke, that's cool that you would see him.
Leo Kottke show in Longview, Washington. So I joined the Grange, and that was in 2004 that I joined the Grange, and he joined the Grange like in 1979. So he's our institutional memory now. And then, you know, I was a DJ on my local community radio station. And so I would play, like, they had 2 turntables there. And I would play on one turntable like Leo Kottke or John Fahey. And on another one, I'd have like Ed Begley reading Walt Whitman. And I would mash them up just live on the air. And it was this cool blend of this like American primitive. And so Bob calls me up because I loved your show, the way you blended that music. And let's you and I do some music. You can play some guitar and I'll read some Walt Whitman. And I was getting into fingerstyle guitar at the time. And then I go, well, no, Bob, why don't you read some original music or original work, your original poetry? And so he wrote this story about this like waitress in this dumpy diner on the outskirts of Denver. And he was trying to be like hip, like kind of beat poet or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. You got to write about what you know. You should write about birds and bugs and nature. And so then he got into it. And yeah, he writes about tsunamis, a lahar, which is when a glacier melts. When a glacial dam melts and it causes an interior tidal wave that heads towards the ocean. It's the other way around. So it's kind of, there was one here in about 12,000 years ago in the area, and it's the Big Flood Glacial Lake Missoula. Anyway, I could just go. He reads Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle. So John Steinbeck, he paraphrases some John Steinbeck and in the Sea of Cortez. So it's just, and there's just like a lot of moods, and it's guitar. It's mostly myself and Bob with Ray from Giants in the Trees. He helped out on that too. So I do that. You know, nobody really ever hears this stuff.
But it's cool that you did it, and it's kind of based truly also on what's going on locally in your life in there in Washington State, which is cool. How do you like living out and living on a farm and doing everything and having that space and that peace?
I've been here for 30 years.
Yeah.
This year or so, and I don't plan on going anywhere. I'm just really privileged to be able to live out here, so isolated. And but I get out, you know, I'll go to Seattle, I'll go to Portland, or I'll go to LA, and I have my pilot's license for about 22 years now. I've been a pilot, and so I'll just fly my plane to like Spokane or Seattle or Santa Monica, Burbank, Southern California. Depends where I'm operating, because there's a lot of airports there, you know, so I do that. And then just making music, and I'm studying again. I do Masters of Legal Studies in energy regulation and environmental law.
Yeah.
It's just policy stuff. If you want to lose listeners, let's get into it.
I think it's cool though.
Stuff.
I just think I love the fact that you've just taken the time, to pursue other things that are interested in your life, and it's
time. I don't want to waste my time. I mean, it's just, time is so precious, and I could just really waste my time being self-destructive, or doing like too much internet. I don't watch TV. I listen to the radio. I mean,
I was so happy you were streaming the show.
I'll listen to Noon Approved.
Yeah.
It's a Sunday night, and I get cozy, and I stream KLOS, and I'm just like, hey, this is what's going on. Here's the top music. Here's some classic songs. And I've always liked that about radio. And because I've done radio, I've done community radio, because it captures the mind's eye. Like, it captures your imagination, and you don't really have all these like special effects and all these visuals that, like, it's kind of, and I read a lot, and just kind of be like quiet and keep my blood pressure down, and just try to be mellow and be healthy.
That's great. And I want to ask you about a couple other things. It was cool that with Giants in the Trees, you guys got together and played the Alice in Chains celebration tribute. Was that fun to do?
Oh, that's another link that happened. Yeah, we were invited to do that. Usually that's the Museum of
Pop Culture,
Mopop in Seattle. If you're in Seattle, check it out. Like Frank Gehry, who did like Disney Hall, he did the Mopop building in Seattle. And so every year they have this Founders Award. And like Paul Allen used to go to those. He was such a friend of the music community, such a benefactor. Like, even to like wild elephants in Africa lost like a good patron when he died. And that was he deserved more years in life, especially with the contributions he made to people. And that's what, the Mopop carries that on. And there was every year there's this Founders Award, and there's a tribute to some artists, and that year was Alice in Chains. However, it was a lockdown, so it was all done on it was all filmed and streamed. I actually thought it was probably my favorite one, because it brought it to the masses. Like, a lot of people dialed into that, and it was like this, you could watch it live, and you can still go back and watch it live. Like, a lot of good performances of, like, Mastodon doing Again,
yeah,
there's like all these really
cool covers of. Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I thought it was great doing all this great.
And we did Drone. So they invited Kim and Jillian and I and Jennifer, and they go, well, what song do you want to do? And I go, well, I've been listening to Rainier Fog, and I love all the Alice in Chains, but I know what it's like. There's your music you did 30 years ago, but then there's music you do now. So I wanted to just show my love and respect to those guys in Alice and say, hey, we played a new Alice in Chains song called Drone, and it's a great song. And that's all that really mattered. There was just like, there was the idea about what we wanted to do, but then there's the song, and the song, it was all about the song, and the song carried us, and it brought us together. Then some people said, hey, you guys should start a band. And that's what we heard. Like, hey, you guys, why don't you, Kim and, Jennifer and Jillian, why don't you do a band? And so then I told the story earlier, how it all came together. Providence, I guess.
Yeah, it's incredible. I also want to talk to you about, I loved when you got together with Dave again and worked on the Wasting Light album. And it was documented in the Back and Forth documentary. But you and Dave doing I Should Have Known was, I mean, I love that record, not only because it's analog, but I mean, song-wise, it was great. And just seeing you guys do that again with Butch Vig in the studio, the family from Nevermind, it was so cool. Talk to me about that.
Well, he does, Dave, he's a mogul. And as such, he's doing, film, documentaries, music, and it's all great. And he's so generous enough to invite me to be part of these things. I love the man. I can't tell you how much. And so I show up, and it's in his garage. He's like, well, we're doing this record different. We're setting up in a garage, and we're doing it straight to tape. We're not doing no digital, no Pro Tools stuff. like, oh, okay. So it's just like, oh, like no punch-ins or no like, now you can just go in there and you can just kind of slap something out. Well, not that I slap things out, but it's like it's very forgiving with what you can do with like click and cut and paste, Command V, Command C, and all the shortcuts. So they're standing there, and it's like Butch and Dave and Pat, and they're kind of standing there with their arms crossed, like, "Here's the bass. All right, what do you got?" And like, "Oh, okay. You mean I just going straight to tape?" The guy, "Yeah, you got to. It's how we used to make records. Like, you just got to play it, right? Like, oh, I don't get to like punch it in and do a couple tapes and you make takes and you make a composite and all that stuff." It's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I'll do it. I can do it. I've done it before, so I did it. So
yeah,
and I just played this like bass solo thing.
It came out. I mean, I loved it, and it came out great. What a great album, and your friendship. I mean, obviously, being bandmates in Nirvana, but I've seen you go on stage with the Foos, and it's just all the different things that you do. It always, it does my heart so good to see it.
Yeah, am I shrinking?
Yeah, no good. But hey, another thing I wanted to ask you too. When we're talking about covers, what made the Unplugged in New York so unique with Nirvana was the fact that you guys decided to, and just said, hey, we're not just going to do our singles, we're going to do covers, and you did so many cool covers. When it came to how much time did you guys spend thinking about what songs you were going to do when you were doing Lead Belly and Bowie and?
I think we did that like. I try to remember. We had a couple of rehearsals, and then I remember really once we had this kind of decided what songs we were going to do, I practiced in the hotel room like a couple days before by myself, just playing along. And then I invited Kurt Kirkwood over, and he and I just started playing together those Meat Puppet songs in the hotel room.
Yeah.
And then everything else just kind of came together. So
was Man Who Sold the World one of the songs that you guys that both all really loved?
Yeah, we kind of played some shoddy version of it at the rehearsals, and then I really just got into it at the hotel again. And we love playing together, and we play together so well. So it's amazing that it really. We pulled it off and then Kurt was so happy and he was so relieved too. Like he was just like, yeah. And so he carries the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. It was incredible. I know you're not, you're in Washington State, but it's pretty incredible, Krist, how much you'll see Nirvana's impact. I mean, we just last year passed the 30-year mark of Nevermind. But, I mean, does it blow your mind how many, I'm sure you know that there are so many kids out there that are still discovering the band and thinking of it as a starting point. I talk to young bands and kids all the time and say, it's Nirvana that made me want to start a band. This is what made me know that I could start a band. I wanted to pick up an instrument. How does that feel?
It's amazing. I think it's just the passion. Kurt was so intense, and there were no pretenses. Like, we just felt that way about the music. The way I played bass is very straightforward. I'm kind of like a hack magician. I do the same tricks over and over again, but they seem to work.
Yeah.
Right?
They do.
So, okay. and then they're like, I don't know how many young people I've taught bass to without ever meeting them. It's just picking out like Nirvana bass lines for records because they're accessible. And then you can get, you can start with Nirvana, then you can go and get into more, if people stick with it, they can get into more like complex bass players. But I think my stuff is kind of that gets people started. So maybe there's part of that with Nirvana. It was a very simple approach, verse, chorus, verse. That's just a classic kind of poppy songwriting, and maybe throw in a bridge, right? And a lot of melody.
Yeah.
Just a lot of melody. And so that's what the human ear, our minds respond to that. And so it's a pretty simple formula.
Yeah. Have you done actually some teaching yourself, or are you, ever?
No, I'm pretty patient as a teacher. I've kind of taught some people here and there, but I never got into it. I don't have time.
Yeah,
You have to have a relationship with people that be teaching them. And so, I had a teacher. I had some music lessons, 2, 3, 4 lessons. Well, I had accordion lessons when I was a kid, and that stuck with me. And then I had some guitar lessons, but mostly I'm like self-taught, and that's just from like picking songs out. Like, how does that bass line go? So that's kind of like, that's good for developing your ear, right? So you're listening critically to a song, like, what is that guitar doing? What are those drums doing? What is that bass doing? And that's really good for just this whole cognitive thing. And part of being a musician, you're critically listening. So, I can kind of read music. I mean, I can read. I have some songbooks, and I picked up that skill when I took accordion lessons. And there's like these psychology studies on like cognitive development, and these case studies. And there's like like if you have children, I would really recommend having like them take music lessons or learning a foreign language. Like even in our local school district here, there's a Mandarin immersion. And so the point is like, there's this window that's open in our cognitive development. You can tell I took a psychology class in college, online college, right? And that window closes around puberty. So if you could get the youngsters in to learn music or a language, that sticks with them for their whole lives. It's just baked in. They don't have to really study conjugation, or you can just learn to do it. And then music is really good, even for like teenagers who are past puberty. That way they're just like, don't stay away from the drugs and the alcohol and all that stuff. And you can learn. Their studies show that teaching music is good for like delayed gratification. Like if you put time into something, down the road you're going to get a reward, which is you're going to learn a song and you're going to develop the skill and concentration. So I'm a big proponent of like music in schools and music for young people.
Oh, I agree 100%. That's why like I donate my time. I've done stuff for Save the Music and a bunch of other music programs. And,
that's what Mopop does. Mopop, and they do that Founders Award. It goes funds music programs for young people, and especially young people who don't have the resources or the access to resources for like music programs. And so that's what Mopop does in the Washington State.
It's so important, man. It's about the musicians of tomorrow. They're going to make great music and keep on passing it on, the gift.
Yes.
It's really what it's all about. Krist, I want to tell you, I know I could talk to you longer, and we'll do it again. I figure
let's do it again.
Yeah.
I'll check in.
I just love to do it again, but I just want to tell you how great it is to have you on here. And and Third Secret, 11 songs on the new
There's
album.
11 songs on Third Secret. We're going to start another record soon. That's the plan. And so we've got some songs already that were left over. There were still about like 5 songs that never made it on the record because they weren't really developed enough, but they're enough to where like, this has got the potential to be a good song. So we're doing that. Maybe play some shows in the Northwest in January. That's our plan. Our videos are on YouTube if you want to check us out. They're all live performances.
I hope you get to come and play Los Angeles. I mean, it'd be great if you guys came down.
I'd like to. Yeah, 2023. That's a possibility. So.
Because it'd be so nice to hang out and see you and Matt and Kim.
Absolutely.
It's like family, man. You guys are my family. Yeah. I love you guys.
Yeah. We go back a long time.
Yeah, so it'd be really great. But we'll definitely do that, and we'll stay in touch, Kim. But I'm sorry, Krist, my brain. I did get hit yesterday by a car, so it's all right.
I know your second car accident. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like one thing after another, right? It's funny, but I'm good though.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I'm glad I made it through.
You're tough. You're a tough cookie.
Yeah, made it through. Yeah, that's true.
You're tough. Good for you. You're not gonna knock. You're gonna knock him down. Yeah, but he's going to get up.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's bloodied but unbowed.
That's it. Absolutely. Yeah. Been making it through and just keep on going. Krist, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks. Thanks, Matt.
And we'll speak to you again soon. We'll have you back on the show. We look forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Krist Novoselic, so great to have him here. The album is called Third Secret. Make sure you check it out. And, of course, all the classic and great Nirvana stuff. You can also check out Giants in the Trees, Sweet 75. There's a lot of things that he's worked on, but make sure you check out Third Secret. Thanks so much, everyone. It's KLOS, new and approved.